Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. The title of tonight's episode is a very interesting title, and it's honestly a title. How can I say it? Let me change this song. Okay. All right. Let's get into it. In the subtitle, I've written "Core of the Unconscious." For me, I figured a model for the existence of the moment. And in some sense, I found a way to become aware of how can I say it? There is a sort of inner categorizational there, behind your eyes. Your intelligence is shaping many things, and at the same time shaping all that phenomena from an already preconceived sense of shape. So you can say your DNA is how your eyes are open before you're born. So what I mean by that is that if thoughts are seen to be conscious, in some sense they orbit around the unconscious. That means all your knowledge is orbiting, is circling what cannot be known in some sense. As if God could never know if it was God or not. Unless God was no longer in a sort of individual sense of knowing. It's as if, of course, on some manner, we're a young species, and I'm kind of being a bit bold here in looking at the world and saying that all our knowledge is empty, as if we are on a ship traveling the ocean, but we think the ship is the world. We think this ship. We think this. Uh, the stories we tell ourselves become our masters. The stories you tell yourself administer and justify how much energy, how much existence can be allowed. For me, the thing with language was that it was as if the presence of the, the ever present freedom of the moment became conditional. And the first condition for a world was that there's somewhere, someone, or something that's needed. There's an attention required to observe it. Sometimes in life, we come to moments where the story of life no longer moves your energetic expression. Back in the day, people worship idols. Nowadays, people worship ideas. And the problem is that just like how it is elusive to see the totality of your intelligence in one aspect of your moment, just like how some people came and looked at these people worshiping idols, and they were like, you know, what are you doing? That's not your God. You know, that's a piece of rock. You know how they say the world turns and changes in a blink of an eye? In some sense, the world changes in the blink of an eye that was never closed. There is a sort of presence of existential attention, allowing, in some sense, existence to be present where experience happens. And so the simultaneity of the experience of the moment and existential phenomena makes you feel you are the creator of the world. For me, I find that half my life has been a sort of me learning from what moves in my attention, and the other half of life is kind of me learning how my attention moves. That means I don't feel that just because we're biological creatures, we're limited to just an objective dimension. I find that every person, whether they like it or not, you can't hide this because it's part of nature. You know, your moment has a subjective quality and objective quality. I find these to be like a very fundamental duality, the biggest duality that all the mysteries of our greatest problems and the mysteries of consciousness rely upon. Because language is like a sort of declaration of a fixed point, it is the emergence of a system that is self contained or self containing. That means when I kind of saw like where my interests led me, I discovered my conditioning. I saw the world was as blind as I was. And that means that my inner world, which comes to me as a sphere on some level, guys, I believe we're spheres. We're spheres of subtler, you know, all thoughts are simulated in a sphere, which is kind of like the aura of the being. This sphere has as much of an edge. You, as a creature, as a moment of being, have as much shape as, in some sense, as much shape as you can consider. You see, this is a data based universe. What I mean is that we are creatures that function based on data. We take data and we change it, and then we, you know, in some sense, we are kind of like data, as if your existence, whether you like it or not, if there was some kind of like futuristic programmer, he would see you as code. He would see your biological phenomena, the emergence of your consciousness, the behavior of your consciousness, all found perfectly fitting into a language of its own creation. But the problem with language is that it can trick the world. That's the problem with language. Language is a very sharp tool. I say language is a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword in the sense that on one level it is our greatest invention, and we must take care of our creations like they were our children. And at the same time, you see, at the same time, it is the cause of war. The inefficiency in an ability of the communicators around the world to communicate properly, it leads to these kind of um, debris of collision of inner. It's as if like when people can't communicate properly, uh, two worlds are falling apart in disagreement. You see, this is why anger arises in debate, because literally beings are in front of one another, and they each have an experience of the world which they are considering to have validity. The only reason I can talk about reality is because some part of me was like, okay, I'm really here. I'm really existing in this game of matter and attention. It's hilarious. I'm telling you, eventually any system that you stay long enough in will seem like a simulation. Boredom is a sort of transcendental curiosity, because it makes you feel like, okay, I'm bored. What do I do? I can't do anything. And so the most beautiful thing is that sometimes when you can't externally progress anymore, you must internally progress. And for me, a concept that I still like have much to learn from is the concept of balance. Because just like how you can't like just go out walking in the street with one shoe on and one shoe off, because it is an imbalance to your whole like your alertness. One sees that you cannot go on with a belief yet not exploring the directness of your experience of it. So in some sense, I'll tell you, truth is not our biggest problem. For mankind to find the ultimate truth, in some sense it is important for the inner realm, but for the inner self, but for the outer self, there's no point of exploring a universe this vast. It's like a soup of energetic phenomena. Like, what do you want me to say? We're in a world of shapes. Everything is in shape. The words I'm saying to you, their value is in a shape. That shape, fundamentally, in order to, in some sense, touch your emotions, language has to become a movie. It has to be a movie that your mind animates. Just like how you read a book, these words are kind of like ink on an invisible page, and your mind, in some sense, hears it, and in some sense, comprehends that it is possible for inner realities to be shared and for the emergence of greater realities. However, what is very hard, what the challenge of civilization, that means I'm not here to give answers per se. I'm here to tell you there are problems coming. And these problems are arising due to the lack of an authentic effort to know what's going on before your eyes close for the last time. That means I don't want to use mortality as a marketing tool, but I'm telling you, we gotta ask the questions that we have one lifetime to ask. And so what happens is that when one finds, like, trust me, um, you can exist on this planet as as feeling as if you're a body that somehow is projecting a mind you don't understand how it's there. But you can also live and exist in moments in this world where your intelligence is not just from your biological body, because the energetic existence is that attention is the whole moment. That's the secret. That's the secret to higher to a proper comprehension of multidimensional realities. It is to recognize when the inner considers the outer to be true, it is void, it is invisible. Trust me, our consciousness is playing hide and seek between existence and non-existence conceptually. It is playing hide and seek, and in some sense going from visibility into invisibility. Like some sort of spiraling swimmer. You know, in the water, out the water, in the water, out the water, in the water. You see, it is a sort of built up of momentum. So for me, I'm like, so let me get this straight. People are like, solve your problems. When I was younger, I had a problem. I would tell somebody to like solve your own problem, kid. You'd be like, everybody has problems. One of the most liberating sentences I heard that made me just learn to love this species is that everybody is fighting a war you cannot see. That means I could be here, da 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 da, happiness, la 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 la. But at the end, there are moments in my life where the critical value of my existence is being challenged by material objective phenomena. For me, the first, like, here's the thing. First, my eyes would open and I would just see this moving thing. Then as a kid, like I learned language and all this stuff, and I'm kind of like, speeding through many years. But like, I came to a point where I got bored with the idea of myself. And I feel I indirectly realized the ultimate. That means, believe it or not, guys, boredom, if you are if you're just naturally, um, you gotta be drawn to realities that you will function in properly. Okay? We are given this illusion of a society that has to be the parent, has to make sure every kid, it treats every kid properly. Yet in the actuality of it, it's like this kind of cruel, lifeless machine where if you don't obey the system, you're thrown in the shredder, just like the paper where all legality is kept on. So for me, it's very fascinating because it's no longer about the battle of beliefs. That's the old world. We've moved past that era. We have entered the era of advanced communication, the era of advanced communicators, the era of the pilots of consciousness. That is what my whole existence is. Inspiration is just to allow people to just consider the idea that after billions of years of some sort of intelligent evolutionary movement, an ape learned to speak, write, and read. It was as if we are at a trial of a perfection, of an intelligence that was able to learn and advance and evolve because it could consider a new dimension. The hope of our ancestry was the opportunity of the future. Do you see? Nobody is ever living for themselves. You think you are. Yourself, in some sense, doesn't exist because the idea of yourself changes based on the environments you enter. So I'm telling you, you just think you're a physical being right now. You just, because when you look in the mirror, you're like, okay, this is it. I see my body, that's it. But I'm telling you, there is something looking out through your eyes that has no attribute, has no quality, has no super mystical spiritual story, but it is the unmoving witness of your moment. And any being who finds this, I will say, you have been blessed internally. Yet the external is either a playing field or a battlefield. If you make this world too cruel in your internal existence, that means if you think good stuff's not happening, guess what? The allowance for good is not there. If you feel you've done wrong, you can't just write on, like, do affirmations, I'm gonna be right, I'm gonna be right, Like, it's like, it doesn't work. You can't manipulate the forces of a system that you objectively come across as a segment of, but subjectively, internally, behind your eyes, you are in some sense. When a person on earth described heaven, a random person, not prophetic, people laughed. And people laughed. Because they said, how can you be in one room and speak about the truths of another room? And that man was lost to the mind of the moment. Every moment has a level of intelligence, and its intelligence comes from the inquiry. I'm going to be very poetic here, and I think Leo Tolstoy's is giving me, like, a hypothetical high five. But Leo Tolstoy has this quote where he says, "The strongest warriors are time and patience." And when you recognize that time is something that is occurring, that is moving your story forward, and patience is the acceptance of existence, because what else does it have to live for? The world is endlessly living for your eyes, and your eyes are endlessly living for the world. And this is why, rather than singing Kumbaya on the beach, we command the love of the eternal. That means if an alien comes here, an extraterrestrial, I would look at it, is this creature more internally oriented or externally oriented? Does it automatically know how to move like a robot in every moment? Do you see? Or does it have certain gaps of doubt, gaps of mystery? Just like how your eyes blink, your inner eyes blink. And when your inner eyes blink, it's as if there is no observer. Yes, there is observer. No observer. Yes, there is no observer. That kind of dynamic. Imagine half of a circle sandwiched between two parallel lines. I consider that our misery is not our misery. That means you can be here and objectively go through various phenomena, whether well oriented or not. But one has to kind of comprehend, like, honesty is how life is here, not how life should be here. Do you see? You're all probably listening. Like, what do you see? What do you mean? It's incredible when I give these talks. It's the edge of the unconscious is the edge of the conscious. Aldous Huxley has this quote where he says, there are things known and things unknown, and in between are the doors of perception. And so, this sort of storification that seems to be generated from our biological mechanism, which in some sense creates a domain of attention where one becomes the observer and the object as both existentially valid and non-existentially valid. Do you see people are terrified of non-existence because they're like, what then? And I will tell you, the worry is for a character in a story. If we really take the idea of death seriously, you will be, in some sense, shocked. I think that every human being will discover the true face of death, and they will see the inevitable destiny of matter and organic matter and biology. You see, inevitably, the doctor can do so much until time takes you away. So for me, I think every human being is a candle, where the wax is melting, but there is illumination. Your attention is a world that can be shared with the outer. And this is my belief, that if behind your eyes there is something going on that's not just an objective reality, bring it into objective reality. Because the doctor at the doctor's office won't know what's wrong with you until you share your symptoms, you know? Like, that's some super advanced doctor that doesn't ask you a question and gives you a prescription. That's Ayurveda for you. You know, the dude was like, okay, this moment needs to exist in this way. It doesn't matter, in some sense, the stories we give it. The moment moves on. The beautiful thing about matter is that it changes. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being in a world where things didn't go forward? Nothing changed. And I will tell you something fascinating. When you look at a belief, and when you look at when a person says, I believe this, it is an unchanging, unending allegiance to an image. Do you see? If we're creatures beyond image, how can we uh, simply accept the images of our knowledge? There's been moments where, even in some of these talks, probably some people could notice, I've noticed thoughts orbit. That means I don't believe we forget ever. I don't believe that I believe that the inner reality is preserved regardless of the outer. What Descartes did, Rene Descartes, in his presentation of dualism, of the concept of, like Descartes' dualism, as if mind is in its own room and body is in its own room. I slow hand clapped in my mind when I understood Descartes had done that. But then I slow hand clapped for really ancient Vedic traditions when I realized they had uncovered it. Because this world is like a painting that has a lot of dust on it. And every effort of every generation in every era is to uncover what has not been uncovered. What greater purpose can there be? Sometimes our discomfort makes us dishonorable. That means there's been moments where I've noticed that, like, before saying this, say that Marcus Aurelius has this quote, Caesar has this quote, where he says, the soul is dyed with the colors of its thoughts, with the color of its thoughts. And what he means is that the reaction of an animal has no justification in the observer of that phenomena. The beautiful thing about psychology and philosophy and linguistics and many other domains of study in academia, the whole notion is that they are trying to keep the unknown alive. For me, it's like I feel like universities are comedians. The university systems are comedic because rather than inspiring uh, a sort of grand value for new ideas entering the global system, we're all obsessed about what we need enough to get by. That is nonsense. I refuse to live with the mediocrity. Okay, I'm just gonna live and get by through this world, and then that's it, right? Like that's that. I feel you have to see the value in the eyes of the grandchildren of mankind. If you cannot see that value, you're just go you're in a room. You have a box in your head and you think you have found your own paradise. This life changes way too much for us to be convinced by it. That's what I've understood. And for me, it has become more of a performance. First, I would wake up in the morning and have this constant certainty. Okay, this is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. This is my day. Da da da. But then I began waking up without shaping my moment, and the most unique shapes emerged and appeared in my consciousness. I'll be honest, I've had moments on this planet as a human being. Part of, like, I want to make this galactic in case, we have, um, our imaginations tuning in. This is seldom said, but the control of destiny can be said to be a siddha. Success could be said to be an ability. It is an ability which, on some core level, is given. And so, when in some sense you kind of see that your ability is really how your attention creates the world for you, more than just what you believe the world to be prehand. It's as if we need history to look beyond history. That's it. That's all I'm saying. I feel our species is really concerned with knowing things obsessively till it dies. And in doing so, it has evolved. It has evolved to where technology is going to become another member of our civilization. And when machines walk among men, the world is cold and cruel in ways that the living heart will, just cry in pity. Because the irresponsibility of now is the hells of the future. You see what I'm saying? You gotta live as if all every human being ever existed is here with you. You discover the ultimate power of the moment. It is instantaneously valid. You become an instantaneous being. Oh my God! Like I know some people might be listening to me like, what do you mean instantaneous being? I mean a creature that has found a way, due to a very unique evolutionary biological occurrence, as if we could have been just like all the other animals we consider less evolved than ourselves. But why do we consider this position? I find that evolution was built on pride. It was built on arrogance. It was built on a sort of separation. You know, a sort of uh, going against the system of what everything else was like. So for me, trust me, it's like energy is patterns of manifestation. We are so able because behind our eyes the world can change at very incredible speeds. Your attention can just move in many ways. Think of it this way: your attention throughout the day is how the artist is holding the brush or how the writer is writing the words, holding the pen. So for me, it comes down to a sort of abidance through an acceptance of these universal truths that make you realize the value of your mortality is to contribute to efficient immortality. And when I say efficient immortality, that means okay, there's a game going on here. We've all opened our eyes to it, and we're like, okay, this thing's going on here. And we know that we're here for a little while. We're tourists in manifestation. That's like a very playful, eternal view, a spiritual view. We are travelers, and when you consider yourself as a traveler, all your misery is falls like you dropping a heavy backpack. You see that you have always had the permission that you've been waiting for. It's that kind of freedom, that kind of texture. Because what is the purpose of energy? Somebody tell me this. What is the purpose of energy? The purpose of energy is to evolve, to advance to a point where energy could wonder if it was energy. It's an oscillation between the known and the unknown. I'm telling you, where the paradoxes of the world will eventually come into one ultimate paradox. And that ultimate paradox is that when we think we're temporary, we, in some sense, our subconscious takes the eternal position. Your subconscious is like how your foot's in, like you're by a swimming pool and your foot is in the water. Your subconscious is not, it's like, it's really, in some sense, it's like your body is outside of water, so like primarily your attention's there. But when your foot is in the water, you're in some sense, also getting a sense of the temperature of the water and how what do you say, like, how the flow of the water is and whatnot. You have one lifetime to live for humanity. What greater motivation do you need? What greater success can you attain? What kind of success is this, that you go on a mountain when all your community and the world dies? For me, I don't understand why some people who accumulate an incredible amount of wealth are trying to indirectly act like gods in a battlefield. The gods are at war when those making decisions are too bound by their beliefs to see otherwise, to see another sort of wisdom, another approach to the reality. Now, a statement that I have said, and I believe I'm the only, I feel like I'm the only person who's ever like kind of brought this idea up in my 27 years of existence and kind of scoping around through various libraries and databases. Like I haven't seen it yet, but I could tell you this: that God likes spheres. The presence of the moment gives full permission to its personality, because its personality is as temporary, even more so than the physical body. Your body, um, in some sense, your objective existence, your objective existence is like 100 years, but your subjective existence can change in an instant. This is why they said enlightenment was in an instant, because that's how attention works. You know, they asked Kabir, this very enlightened yogi, Indian sage, and they asked them, you know, how long does it take to get enlightened, Kabir? And Kabir was like, brah. Kabir was like half of an instant, half of an instant. With that, he's being poetic. He's being incredibly genius. He's saying before the concept of time, before the concept, before an idea. The moment there's levels you can say to waking up from the slumber of non-existence, and as you wake up to it, you begin to see that you cannot avoid how nature is happening for you. So I'm sorry to say, just like how your face is, you know, you will eventually find yourself on some condition in this spectrum of stories that people are telling themselves. When we care for people's inner environments more than their outer environments, we will have loved the world before we have lost it. The value of an idea. Okay, so I don't know if I'm online right now. YouTube is showing offline, but it should be on. Okay, so my okay, nice. I think I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. You know how they say don't drink and drive. I'm saying don't smoke and speak. um, Pretty much what I'm trying to get to is that our life is the stories of our life come across as certain conditions of how nature's laws are being interpreted by us. But eventually, this sort of conditional story will discover a sort of uh, unconditional presence in how the moment is alive. So it's as if, like, because you're here and alive, behind your eyes you feel you're eternal. Because what is the point of life? It seems to be to exist, to be here. So the first, as if everybody has, in some sense, finished, fulfilled their life purpose by just existing as part of nature's design. As if like a tree doesn't donate money to a charity, but it doesn't mean that tree is not, uh, it has no value. You see, it doesn't mean it has. It's just a tree. It is an emergent aspect of nature. We are an emergent aspect of nature that is self aware. And we are in an unknown. So the beautiful thing is that we don't know enough about our world. So that's why we're going to evolve quicker, you know. If a world can be seen as a thought, and if you can consider thoughts orbiting around you as if there are worlds and many modes of matter orbiting around your present attention. I want you to just look at this picture I've chosen. I want you to see that what is looking through and looking at that planet, it is the eyes of the world looking at itself. And each moment stands in multidimensional ways. The unknown will inspire a sort of creative curiosity towards a global, not just a global, but a universal efficiency. And, in some sense, I hope very soon we find different sources for food because it the more sensitive, the more you care for life, like the more you feel this life is like, wow, it's just happening in here and it's just remarkable for you, the less you will be burdened. You the less you will be burdened if, in some sense, uh, the story of the world doesn't exist for you. Sorry to say, but that I feel like that's true because experientially, there's just an instantaneous, attributeless presence of attention. You know, call it new, call it unknown. You could try to map words, but for me, you know, there is a world we're painting over the world which we don't even realize, and that is self-awareness. Is the resolution to that? It is the search for the search for freedom that is no longer based on outer conditions. Your mind becomes a voice of the world, and your voice becomes an effort to push a civilization in space and time, to push it into advancement. We need chaos, or our systems of order will no longer need to exist. We need order, or there will be no chaotic change, or there will be nothing to change. There will be nothing to evolve. I have learned that my whole life I searched for knowledge. I searched for true knowledge, and I'll tell you, you come towards a reverence. You reach the reverence of the unknown, and the moment is no longer lying to itself because it fears a sort of simulated consideration of how the future is going to be. You don't let the future disturb you when you are doing your great work. You know, it's kind of like give your world a chance to breathe in a new way. It, really seek the concept of beauty and understand that the beauty you see in someone else is, or in something else, or in whatever. There's been moments where I have, in some sense, like fallen in love, and there's been moments where I have felt I have fallen in love. Okay, and what I mean by that is that as if I have been born, as if the world love, as if love is a quality of existence of conscious stories. Without it, they die. If you don't love something, you don't care for it. It doesn't exist for you. It's not real for you. The idea of that person doesn't enter your attention. You know, I find the biggest cause of divorce around the world is ignorance. That's it. It is a sort of blindness, as if when those two people were in love, they were in the same room. They were walking in the same world together. But suddenly, when their worlds changed, their attentions moved in different ways and did not honor the code of their movement, the code of their journey. It's kind of like Lord of the Rings fellowship. So the question remains, what do thoughts orbit around? I consider the conscious to be orbiting around the center of the unconscious, and I find that what is with the universe within is as endless as the universe outside, and they're codependent. Just like you have two brain hemispheres, two let's say major ways your intelligence functions biologically in regards to creative expression. You kind of see like the same way as if a part of you is running from the order towards the chaos and a part of you is running from the chaos towards the order. And as you see this happen after lifetime, lifetime after lifetime, various moments of manifestation, the creature is in some sense just as if like your head is in water, out of water, in water, out of water, like manifestation, non, it's like existence, non-existence. So what? You'll reach that point. You'll reach a point where you will be like, what is the point of my eyes? And you will see it is in what they can see. You know, Henry David Thoreau, this incredibly enlightened American poet, you know, which I don't understand why they're not teaching his stuff in, you know, like 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 schools or whatnot that much. But he says it's not what you're looking at that matters, it's what you see. Do you know what I mean? It's not your reaction or your first interpretation or reception of data that's important. For me, thoughts, it's like it's a sort of we're the image, the idea of yourself is preserved by your past. Let's put the concept of karma aside for a second. Let's say that right now you're this biological creature that is generating somehow a momentary subjective sort of existence, as if you're not just a body, you're a person, you're a being, you're a human being, you know. So the human aspect it relates to the design aspect of it, to the particle aspect of your existence. But then you see you also live in a way where your thoughts kind of have a shape but they don't. They're as if but they don't exist. I could imagine right now a giant apple just floating in the air in where I'm sitting, like in front of me, like an arm's length away. But I'll see, I can't. Like I see it, the idea is there. A sort of blue subjective blueprint has been laid upon the of the moment, upon the matter of the moment. But at the same time, I see that it's as if it's as if like another world is within us, and that is the subjective realm. It starts off, that's the beginning, but as you navigate your plane of existence beyond regulation of subject of like be a maverick, be as chaotic as you want, but internally, don't bring it into your external. Don't let one man's mistake become a species mistake because it's so unnecessary. You know, a very funny thing is that pretty much wisdom attains humility through a recognition of that which is inevitably foolish. It's all attention dancing between the chaos and order of its own consideration. For me, it's like this, right? I find the challenge of the true origin of consciousness. You got to think of it this way. Imagine you were looking from a telescope, through a telescope, or and you saw something, you know, you saw something, or looking through a camera or whatever, and let's say telescope, you know, you look through a telescope and that imagine your child like just like how a child is born and sight is activated. So imagine like the first image for existence a person received, like a child received, was like it was an image of looking through a telescope. And that child, imagine it can't know unless something out of nature's uh, sort of command moves the being. They will never question the world they're living in. They will never question the world and how it changes, how it moves. My mind is as alive as my greatest ideas. My greatest ideas are as alive as there's a world for them to be here. Do you see? Ultimately, your most selfish endeavor will lead towards the collective value. And the collective value is, why didn't you help with a world that was turning uh, for all beings? You know, I find if there are advanced extraterrestrial species and they kind of avoid, like, this was what was this called, Fermi's paradox, where this dude was like, where is everybody, as if like, where are all other beings? You know, like, there's so many suns in our galaxy, and each of those suns, you know, have solar systems around them. Not every one of them. What I'm saying, like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of potential inhabitable planets. Uh, However, uh, rather than we sacrificing biology for ideology, we sacrifice ideology for biology. And once our biological existence has become the temple of our experience, and we value the conditions of it, then we will begin to cultivate the unconditional. So what I mean is, like, guys, trust me, the beautiful thing about the concept of mastery in any art, in anything you do, is that there's an ultimate state of performance that each person, just like how they gotta climb a mountain on their own, has to attain. So I personally believe any person who chooses to uh, concentrate on anything, that's what mastery is, pretty much. You know, they say do 10,000 hours of something, and you'll be, you know, good at it. And in some sense, the repetition of manifestation, as if we are all becoming master experiences of our moment based on its ups, how it moves, how it changes, how the chaos and order emerge throughout the day. For me, there's moments where chaotic phenomena occurs. When this chaotic phenomena occurs, hopefully behind, like internally, I'm my mind is gentle, you know, because when there's chaos behind your eyes and there's chaos in front of your eyes, Jesus Christ, just sit down somewhere, because your state of being is agitated in both ends. So I'm speaking to you as if you're not just a being in one dimension, you're in two worlds at the same time. I'm speaking to two ways that your existence occurs, and how your intelligence receives it based on the exploration of your existence. The way I use the concept of existence and experience is that the word existence relates to objective physical matter stuff, you know? But the word experience relates to the subjective identity. Do you see the difference of this? And many great philosophers have understood this. Like, that was the whole point of Descartes I was making. So the exploration of ideas, when ideas do not become instructions, but rather ideas become tools, you will build incredible things if you use an idea without getting attached to it, as if, like, how there was a sort of saying in Christianity where, I believe it's in the Bible, um, but Christ says, "Be in the world, but not of it." To be in the world, but not of it. What that means is that you realize you're existent, yet you recognize the transference of image and ideology in the experience of a moment. That means all those people who are drawn towards anybody who's trying to attain some other state of mind is caught in a paradigm of chasing the butterfly, which is using the wrong exit, using the wrong approach. For me, if somebody was to ask me, and let's say I was transitioning out of this existence, and they were like, "Okay, what's the last thing you would tell like this world?" I'd say something like, "Appreciate your magnificence, because why not?" And that's it. I think this would be my these would be kind of sort of my last uh, uh, the last words of just how I have piloted my moment so far. Trust me, we once we move past the era of idea worship, we're going to use ideas to navigate consciousness. And we're going to begin to recognize the subtler ways that the subconscious is here. Because the subconscious, when I say you're in two worlds at once, that means the moment you're in two worlds, in some sense, in a very right angle way, you're in four worlds. I like don't. This is not linear mathematics. I'm just saying it's just like the moment your mind has an ability to create a world, then it creates a subconscious for itself. It concludes a world before the world now, and the subconscious is it the unknown pretty much. And it doesn't have to just be the world before the world now. It's just where knowledge has no longer. No, it is where knowledge has not walked further from, something like that. So just look at again this picture and just see, like, if you were on this, let's say space station or whatever, and you saw this planet and you thought, wow, when we were zoomed into it, when we were really in the games of life, we forgot it was more than just being a player. But when we saw beyond, we gained a new appreciation. For me, it's very kind of I find it's a bit ironic, and at the same time, I consider America to be uh, one of the most incredibly creative nations to ever exist. And I consider all nations to be creative, but the efforts made due to how the culture of one community was kept, even though a lot of chaos and blindness and, in some sense, covert pain and suffering is there, the liberation of the inner freedom of one individual commands the liberation of the inner collective, in some sense, the species, the liberation of the species. As if what would you do after you have succeeded? What would you do? You would look at the world and see that idea and where it does exist and where it doesn't. Sometimes our life it's very strange. It has no meaning for us, but how we live has meaning for the future. In some sense, we live so the eyes of our great, not our great, but like the eyes of our, you know, children's children is open to see it all. It's not that we just need to be responsible for the planet. We have to be responsible for the inner universes of every child that comes into a system where their creativity is non-existent at first. Pretty much the value of life is in the ideas that help the whole system. That's it. That's where the greatest stories lead. That's where time and patience lead. There's no greater power than acceptance. Acceptance can bound you to a circle, to just a one way of looking at the world. And true metaphysical self inquiry is when you wonder how the world looks at you beyond thought. And you begin to realize you can't just you can't ignore your true nature. You can't if there's a person right now struggling with any sort of stress, depression, let me tell you why that happens. That happens when you feel the future has not come too early, when you feel you're being abandoned by your future expectation of how the future should be. Live in a world where fear never existed, even though there will be moments where you will react to situations, be like, holy shit, but like, fear conceptually doesn't need to be in your attention. If your attention was like a sort of space, like what are you allowing to enter this space? Sacredness is an inner relationship with an outer world. It is the conclusion that the outer world has, in some sense, come into formation from the inner. That means even if you consider neurons to be the highway of thought, neurology to be the study of the highways of, subjective phenomena, I guess, and it's very hard to explain, how subjectivity exists and objective, but I guess your eyes are open in many ways. In There's this show called Attack on Titan. I believe it's episode 53, uh, in the second part of the third season. And there's a speech that the main guy gives, and the speech the guy gives is like there's just it's very hard for me to explain the story, but if you check it out, you might be interested. Uh, the guy, like, there's this kind of hopeless soldier looking at like this sort of general figure, and this general figure, his name is Erwin. And so Erwin is there, and then his soldier is gone into this kind of like scared frenzy, and it's just looking at the general. It's like, you want us to ride to our death, you know? And then the general is just very intense and serious, and the general's like, yes. And then the guy's like, he says, you want us to, he says this line, Jesus Christ. Oh, he says, don't our lives have a value, a meaning? Is this the best way or something like that? And then Captain Erwin just says no. And he's constantly trying to show these people that in an inevitable circumstance, we're alive once, in an inevitable circumstance, how you approach the moment is where the truth is found. Discover your own clarity. It is worth the. It is. It is. It is a wisdom light years beyond language. Thanks for tuning in, and just for me to give a simple answer to the title, what do thoughts orbit around? Uh, the center of their original attention. One thing I feel I should add, the inner non existence and the outer non existence are the same, but the outer existence and the inner existence are not. As if a coin flip is two dualities spinning at the same time. There's the two sides of the coin, and there's this constant spinning motion of the different sides of the coin facing up and down. Our eyes were open before they could be closed. That's a good. That's kind of like the greatest motivation, thing you could say to people. I guess I'm going to share one story before I go because these ideas are coming. There's this story of Buddha, the Buddha, the awakened one, the blessed one, giving a silent sermon where in his hand he was holding a flower. This guy who's gone to town and he's just holding a flower and people are just standing there listening to this silent sermon. And suddenly they say there was this old man, I forget the man's name, but he became famous. He was the only person in the town. All the disciples were all trying to act like divine and good and disciplined and all this. You know, they weren't being really themselves. And this old man in the back who had a broom in his hand just looked at this, like the Buddha holding a flower and everybody just staring at the flower. The old man smiled because the old man did not see Buddha, saw the flower. But all the disciples of Buddha saw Buddha, they did not see the flower. They did not see what Buddha was seeing. They saw the Buddha. That's the problem with language. It is beautifully elusive in a sort of abstract certainty. Sometimes, you don't have to believe others. Sometimes you don't have to even believe yourself. What I mean by that is that you gotta allow your attention to realign. Okay, that's the end of the talk, guys. If there's any questions.